welcome everybody. We have the power panel tonight, Lee and Rosa. Woo! Alright, today's show is going to be vaccines. We're going to discuss herd immunity and no autism. We're going to discuss autism.
Vaccines cause autism.
I wanted to bring that up.
Smart person ever.
Well, you know, Jenny McCarthy says she's smart, so, you know, there's that. She's an N of one. But, yeah, tonight we're going to be talking about what vaccines are, what they do, how they affect the immune system, and how they save lives, and how they're economical. And pretty much I'm going to call Lee out for not dressing up because, you know, he calls me out all the time being a schlub. But, yeah. So,
I'm sick. I'm coming over a sickness. I didn't get vaccinated, and that's why I'm sick.
Yeah, but...
this was 3 weeks in the making. I planned to get this infection, actually.
Planned it. All right, so yeah, so basically we're going to be talking about how vaccines work, what they do, and give a breakdown of why they don't cause autism. Do not. They cause autism. No, I'm kidding. All right. So we'll talk about the immune system first and give you a little intro into what it is and how it works and all that fun, happy stuff. There's basically two arms to the immune system, the innate immunity, which is kind of like your front line and your first defenders to your immune system. So when you get the little sniffles, but not the full-on cold, that's basically your innate immunity working as it should be. That includes your skin, your mucosal membranes, whether that's your nose, the inside of your nose, your esophagus, your lungs, all those fun things that are covered by barriers. In particular, epithelial barriers. Phagocytes, which are your macrophages, your big things that eat little things.
Yeah, neutrophils.
Then you have your complement, which is your C proteins that actually go and puncture bacteria and different things like that. They work in like a pretty systematic way where you go your C3, C3A,
Yeah, I mean, there's
C3B.
something called a complement cascade during infection. Pretty much your innate immune system attacks all bacteria and all viruses the same way versus the adaptive arm of the immune system, which has more of a specified or memory-based type function to attack specific pathogens, just in case you're introduced to them over time.
Nice, thanks. That's actually a really good way to break it down.
That's what I'm here for.
So I think most people have heard of B cells and T cells. Your B cells actually spit out your antibodies, which recognize and coat foreign antigens. Antigens are the things that antibodies recognize. People have heard a bit of antibodies, right? Should we go into details about what antibodies are?
I think we should go into it. You know, there's these there are these Y-shaped proteins. Pretty much, yeah. They have two arms. People should be familiar with this, and one of the pros for breast milk is because they carry antibodies in them from the mother, and this creates pretty much a baseline for an immune system in infants, so they pretty much have the protection of the mother until they can start producing their own antibodies.
IgAs.
So yeah, B cells specifically plasma cells make antibodies. They are the activated, mature version of a B cell. But yeah, not to get too much into the cell biology.
So B cells are more like, you know, they're going to be the cells that identify things. They're going to coat things with antibodies, recognize them with antibodies.
The first line that's going to
target, and then they're going to help activate T cells. T cells help activate B cells. It's a nice feed-forward loop or a positive feedback loop where one thing happens, it makes another thing happen, and that next thing goes back and makes the first thing happen more, the second thing happen more, so on and so forth.
And the diagram is pretty much a simplified version of here, but when we're talking about B and T cells, especially T cells, there are like 8 different types of T cells. You have T helper cells, you have cytotoxic T cells,
Treg cells,
Th17, T helper 17 cells that secrete specific
T helper 1s, T2s.
So there's definitely this large interplay associated with the immune system that ultimately confers your ability to fight infection.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why you get an infection one time, you beat it, and you don't get sick from that infection again is because of the adaptive arm of the immune system.
And the reason why you get the flu every year, or could get the flu every year, is that the flu virus changes so that your adaptive immune system that has an imprint of the flu is the previous flu.
Well, that's
it mutates and...
They were taking they predicted that it was only 40% effective last year because of the strain. If you're not getting the correct strain, and you know, have a kid that then had the vaccine, you can still get the flu. They're just trying to make whatever they think is the strain that's going to be the most prevalent for that year.
Yeah, that's done through epidemiological studies and a whole bunch of algorithms and math that I don't even want to go into.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the fact that you look up like vaccine, you know, effectiveness and vaccine efficacy. The WHO has like clear determinations associated with these two terms. You know, so the WHO is a World Health Organization. They describe vaccine efficacy as the World WHO.
Yeah.
Who? World.
Who? Who are you?
Yeah, the WHO.
The who?
They say vaccine efficacy is the percent reduction in disease incidence in a vaccinated group compared to an unvaccinated group under optimal conditions. So that's how they judge how effective a vaccine is. Another way to judge that is the ability of the vaccine to prevent outcomes, or in this case, it's prevent sickness, prevent infection, prevent outcomes of interest in the real world, right? So how often do people get sick when they've been vaccinated versus when they're not vaccinated? So this is, of course, total number of cases versus people that are unvaccinated, and you get percents based like this. And each year, with the flu vaccine specifically, because the virus has changed, we always find out, hindsight, how effective that vaccine was beforehand. It's really hard to predict how effective a vaccine will be until you actually have studies out there.
They're normally retrospective in that case.
Right.
So retrospective is when you look at something in hindsight. So
Right.
you look at something after the fact. Okay, cool. So I like how you gave that nice explanation about the flu. I didn't know that. I didn't actually know that about the flu vaccine, that they do that in terms of...
Yeah, so I mean...
I should have. You know, it's like something that you should know, but when somebody explains it to you, you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know? Cool.
I mean, so they always have predictions, and they say this should be this effective, but it depends on the virus, man. They, as Rosa was saying earlier, they create these predictions off of the most prevalent and the most virulent vaccines around that time frame, and produce a series of antigens associated with those prevalent flu strains. And the likelihood that you get infected by one of the ones that we prepared a vaccine for is high, but there's a chance that you get infected by a strain that we couldn't vaccinate you against. And you get infected and you get the flu.
And one of the things that I think was a really big misconception is when I was in my family care rotation, a lot of people said, I don't want the flu, it's a live vaccine. And the ones that are actually by the CDC that are recommended, they're all non-live vaccines. And so you're not given a live virus. And there are intranasal flu vaccines, but there's not the ones that are currently standard of care, and for the elderly, non-live vaccines. And I think...
Attenuated?
Yeah, attenuated it means they're weakened either by heat inactivation or through molecular mutations associated with their ability to cause infection.
I know we're not going to get into like the nitty gritty of the types of vaccines and the types of vaccinations or types of antigens that are going to be in the vaccine. So this is a good little touch on. So
you can't get sick. You can't get the flu from the vaccine.
Yes.
That's like a very primary subject. That's what you're leading to. People get vaccinated and then they get sick after the fact. And the reality is the vaccine itself did not get you sick. And the reality is you can probably get an infection as an incubation time. That's common with most pathogens, and they vary amongst bacteria versus viral. So you can be infected, but you're not showing symptoms. It could just be by happenstance. It's actually very common for you to be exposed. You go get the vaccine, and then it's already too late. You're already been infected.
Yeah, the measles has actually got a 2-week exposure to symptom time. So you get exposed, let's say Monday of this week, you won't get symptoms for 2 weeks after that. I think it's 10 to 14 days, somewhere in that vicinity.
Right.
So everyone's different. Everyone has a different response to pathogens and different response to antigens. But primarily, there is a set amount of time into which you're actually going to get exposed and then show symptoms of the disease, or you're not going to get the disease. I know clinically you probably have a better idea of that in terms of timelines, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's a bell curve. I mean,
it is.
People fall differently on that spectrum.
Of course. But, let's talk about the adaptive immune system a little bit. Let's kind of break this down in terms of, you get your infection at the beginning of let's say today, and then a week later your body needs to fight this off. So your innate immune system fails to conquer the virus or the bacteria or whatever pathogen that's causing you to be sick. Your body then goes through clonal expansion for your B and T cells. Basically, that means that the antigen on whatever T cell or B cell identified the target pathogen or antigen goes, oh wow, I'm the best fit, I'm going to start multiplying. And then it goes through a series of what's called clonal expansions, so they start dividing and separating and proliferating, and there's, I forget what the actual term was when they actually go through a refinement process. So say, you know,
positive selection.
Yes, it's positive selection.
Yeah, I think it's positive selection.
Positive selection. So basically, during this multiplication process, they go through recombination of that Y that we were talking about, the antigen,
yeah.
so the VDJ.
The VDJ, yeah.
The
I mean,
VDJ.
that's like super complicated.
Yeah, we're not going to get into too much detail, but let's put it this way. So when a T cell or a B cell, or T cells mostly, or a natural killer cell, dendritic cell, macrophages, the antigen presenting cells will come to the lymph node, present it to the T cell start getting the B cells multiplying, and then at that point in time, they'll refine what is the identifying thing. So the antibody or their, the T cell receptor.
The TCR.
TCR will change its shape ever so slightly to find the best fit match. So let's say you have a circle and it's identified by something that's more elliptical. So that T cell will go to the lymph node and start proliferating, and it'll refine itself in terms of its progeny. So the T cell go to 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever, and it'll change its shape ever so slightly to fit the antigen that much better. And then that one will outcompete all the other ones, and that's how you get your
you have this phenomenon associated with like a co-stimulatory effect. Pretty much, as Dave was explaining, you have a match. Once a T cell has the correct TCR stimulus for that T cell will then proliferate and create clones of itself. Mm-hmm. And then the other cells that don't have that match, that don't have that stimulus, they will kind of fade out and die because they don't have that stimulatory mechanism for them to proliferate.
Yep.
And so though one of the terms we use is like, oh man, I forgot.
Yeah, right off the top of your head, right?
Oh man. Somebody save me here.
It's not an occupancy. I do not know.
Like, not the occupancy, not the domain.
The receptor?
Compartment.
Compartment?
Yeah. So the stimulated T cells will then pretty much fill up that compartment, and that compartment will be the predominant T cell repertoire that you will have to fight against whatever that infection is. After you overcome that infection, some of those T cells will then turn into memory T cells.
Or memory B cells or long-lived plasma cells. And these are basically T and B cells that will stay around. As you can see, you have a high bell-shaped curve here, a drop-off, and then you'll have a second infection. And so the time period here is in weeks. Over here, it's within days. So you literally, within a couple of days, boom, you'll be able to grow enough T cells or B cells because you've already been exposed to.
And you have those memories that are then
Exactly.
like, oh, this is what's going to trigger those specific memories.
Yeah.
That.
Think about it like friends. You know, it takes a while to become friends with somebody, but then say you don't see them for a couple months, couple years, and then when you see them again, it's like boom, right back to it. Right?
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Pretty good analogy, right? I don't know.
I mean, in most infection cases,
you're not friends with the pathogen,
right? So you have your exposure and you have your disease state, but for those of us that have had chickenpox or have been vaccinated against chickenpox, you encounter that virus all the time. You don't get sick from it because your immune system has such a robust response against that viral pathogen that it never gets to a threshold in which it can be pathogenic or where it can be symptomatic.
Fun fact, chickenpox is related to herpes.
Yeah, they're actually in the same family.
Yeah. So yeah.
Shingles is actually the chickenpox virus.
Yeah, herpes zoster. Yeah, believe me, I know. It's fun.
There's actually 8 members in the herpes family.
Simplex 1, Simplex 2, zoster, the chickenpox virus. I don't know the exact name for the chickenpox virus.
I forget what herpes 6 is. That's one.
Yeah.
Herpes 6. Oh, there's what is it? The thing that HIV patients always get. Corposi.
Sarcoma.
Yeah. That's
caused by
herpes virus. Yeah. All right. So types of cellular memory, like we had said before, T cell memory cells, long-lived plasma cells, and memory B cells. Memory B cells will stay in the lymph nodes, long-lived plasma cells tend to live in your bone marrow. So your B cells and your T cells are primarily, and your red blood cells are primarily made in your bone marrow by hematopoiesis. And eventually, when they grow up, they get kicked out of the house and they circulate through the bloodstream. And T cells go to your thymus to mature, and B cells tend to stay in your bone marrow to mature, so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. Plasma cells go back and they hibernate and they hang out in there and then get spit out every now and again to circulate through the body. We're going to go into herd immunity next. You guys have any more things to say about the immune system and B and T cells?
I mean, just the immune system as a whole, we're trying to give you the most comprehensive explanation within a short amount of time here. But the immune system is a multicellular beast, essentially, and there's many different parts to it. And we're going to try to do our best here to give you this like non-convoluted example, but to really understand what's going on at the cellular stage in regards to immune response, we're probably going to have to give you an extensive write-up associated with this. So if there's some gaps in the information here, it's really based on the time-specific situation we've got going on.
We only have about 45 minutes to give as much information to you guys as possible, but pretty much, put it this way, you're exposed to something, you fight it off, and you remember it. In terms of vaccines, you're eliminating the fighting off portion of that. You're giving either a dead virus, part of a virus, a piece of a protein, a piece of a nucleic acid, which is DNA or RNA, whatever the case may be, so that your body can cope with the next infection, whether that's like smallpox. Smallpox, I've never gotten a smallpox vaccination.
No one in our generation has ever.
Unless you're in the Army or some other type of situation. So, put it this way, our parents, or my parents, our parents in general, would have gotten the smallpox vaccine. And it's basically based upon something, Vaccinia, and I think it's made from cowpox, if I'm not...
I mean, Jenner invented the first vaccine associated with milkmaids. That was the Vaccinia virus, which is a family of viruses that smallpox is part of.
Yep.
He realized that, like...
people who've gotten cowpox
didn't get smallpox.
Or if they did, it wasn't that bad. So, where you get scarring and all this horrible
I mean, he
stuff.
essentially died if he got smallpox back in like the 1700s or whatever this was, but he did some real maverick type stuff. He started infecting kids with cowpox and then exposed them to smallpox, and they didn't get smallpox.
Yep.
So he pretty much was the first person to see.
He's actually state sanctioned for that, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing
in England.
Children experiments.
Sanctioned for that. So we're not going to touch on more.
Shout out to Jenner, though, man.
Seriously. Or Jonas Salk, who invented polio vaccination and didn't patent it. Literally gave it to the public for free and gave up millions and millions and a buttload of wealth just so that he could help the general public. So that's when I get a little ticked off that scientists are all in it for the money. So I really want this money that they speak of.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I'm all about that.
I'm totally waiting to get chill or something like that.
All right. So we're going to talk about herd immunity. And this is a big thing and point of contention for anti-vaxxers because they all go, well, if everybody else has the vaccine, I don't need to get my kid immunized.
Is that your anti-vaxxer accent?
Yeah, because they're annoying and they're grating. But it's herd immunity. And herd immunity, what the herd immunity means is that if a bunch of people get vaccinated, that means that the disease or contagion can't spread to the general public. Meaning, if let's say there's 100 people, as we see here, I think that's like 20 or something, but in general, 100 people out of 100 people, like 99 get vaccinated. There's only one person that could possibly get sick. Or let's say out of 100 people, 90 people get vaccinated. It's very unlikely that even those 10 people are going to be infected because all other 90 people are going to either be carriers, but they'll suppress the infection really quickly, or rather quickly in comparison. So let's say
herd immunity is really about, there's this concept associated with herd immunity, and it's about creating reservoirs for disease. When you get infected, you now become a cesspool, an incubator for whatever this disease is. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about eradicating diseases, the reason why we don't encounter smallpox anymore is because we vaccinated the hell out of everybody that was living and breathing.
Yep.
So
Or polio, for
Yeah,
that matter.
just-
When was the last time you saw somebody with polio?
Well, 2012, I think India had its last case, or one of the last recorded cases. Polio is still like in very scarce parts around the world.
Afghanistan.
But think
and
about, we
Pakistan.
have the MMR vaccine, and so you should think that we shouldn't have any measles, mumps, or rubella outbreaks. And I mean, there was on some hockey team, I think in California, was a measles outbreak. There's so many measles outbreak now,
Because
and
People aren't
because
vaccinated.
aren't vaccinated. And also a big thing about vaccination is you're getting them at certain months. And I think we'll go into it later, there's a vaccine schedule. So at certain times, your 2-month-old or 4-month-old may not have those vaccines. And then anyone who is older who decided not to have their kid vaccinated, they all want to go to the same grocery store. You're putting other children at risk. You're putting anyone at risk that hasn't been able to have on the schedule vaccine when they're supposed to.
Also, the elderly are specifically at risk for all these diseases because their immune system is failing.
Or people with cancer, like people who get
they're also
chemotherapy with
immunocompromised.
radiation. Anybody that's immunocompromised, basically somebody who gets like a organ donation, they're immunosuppressed. So all these different at-risk populations are protected by herd immunity. And it goes to the fact that if you do your part and get immunized, you can help prevent other people from getting sick. And that's kind of where I think that anti-vaxxers are very selfish in the regard that, well, I want to make a decision for my child and this, that, and the other thing. Well, you're making a decision not only for your child, but you're making a decision against the grain in terms of all these people and at-risk populations. And that's really, I'm all for choice and all that happy jazz, and I'm libertarian in some regards, but when it comes to the greater good, you need to be a little non-selfish.
Well, infection is a public health issue.
Yeah.
Well,
infectious diseases.
My biggest thing too is just, when you hear people that do believe that they have this choice, it's their facts to back it up, or maybe one discredited doctor, one discredited scientist. It is very crucial, especially in the times that we are now, to figure out what it is you're reading. Is that a credible source? Are there more credible sources? Ask
Turn to the
questions.
Check out my write-up on alkaline diets debunked and how to spot the bullshit.
Yeah.
Excuse my curse word, but it's at the same time, it's what it is. It's bull. It's absolute crap. It's terrible that this can spread and that people believe it, and people don't have the wherewithal to not go, this fits my preconceived notion, maybe I should follow up on it. So that's kind of my hang-up on that. But I think we blasted herd immunity, so...
pretty much the conclusion associated with herd immunity is, did we talk about the R0 value?
Bam!
All right,
R0,
so here
baby!
we go.
Woo!
All right.
Herd immunity is threshold. So herd immunity threshold is the number of people in the population, a percentage of the population, that needs to be vaccinated so that disease does not spread rampantly and gets people sick. And they're predicated upon 3 things, and I'll let Lee take over for the first one, is basic reproduction number, which is also called R0.
Yeah, the R0 value.
R0, whatever, R0. Vaccine effectiveness against
For the math
transmission.
majors out there.
Yeah, right, R0. Ugh, you.
Me.
You're a math
Me.
major. And contact parameter for the population. I'm going to touch on the last 2, and I'll let Lee take over the first one. Vaccine effectiveness basically means how effective is the vaccine. Does it actually immunize you against the antigen? Basically, does the vaccine have a 90% success rate? Does it have an 80% success rate? Does it protect 100% of the people that you give it to? And most vaccines that are given are around 90 to 100%, 90+% in terms of effectiveness rate. So it's not necessarily a major factor in terms of the herd immunity threshold. Contact parameter for the population means how closely congested is the population. So I'm going to give the example of Ebola. Ebola had a R0 value of 2, basically because how quickly people could move from one point to another in Western Africa. And that's predicated upon trains, planes, and cars. Planes, trains, and cars? Automobiles, yeah. Automobiles. Good movie. And it really plays into the R0 value a little bit in terms of how closely everyone is. If you live in the middle of Bumble, wherever, out in like Kentucky or Montana, the contact parameter for the population is real low. So Lee, I'm going to turn it over to you. Rosa, do you know what R0 is? Do you have any ideas about R0?
No.
All right.
I did not do that.
So Lee,
So
take the lead on it, baby.
Yeah, so the R0 value is pretty much a mathematical calculation associated with the ability for a disease to spread, or pathogen to spread. The higher the R naught value, the more virulent it is. The easier it is for it to affect other people, right? So if you look at this list over here, this thing, so the number of people that one sick person will infect, on average, is called the R naught. Here are the maximum R naught values for a few viruses. Ebola is 2, right?
Not
so
very
every
high.
one sick person, they have the potential to get 2 other sick people. Now, we know that that's possible, right? If I have Ebola and I threw up all over 25 people in here, all 25 of them would probably get sick. But that's unlikely because of the mechanism of disease transmission for Ebola, right? Bodily fluids, vomit, feces, and blood. I mean, it's practically very hard to get those things on you. One of the reasons why we saw that outbreak in West Africa was because of their cultural ceremonial abilities when they're touching their dead and stuff like that. But we don't see that type of spread in more industrialized countries. But I digress. So go to measles over here. The R naught value is 18, and the reason why it's so much higher is because measles is airborne. You could sneeze on somebody, you could be close to them, and
You
still
can
get
literally
infected.
breathe on them.
Yeah,
Breathe
so-
on them.
So this is
And
why
the thing about it is that, like I said earlier, the latency period, the exposure period. So you can be exposed. We're
Right.
sitting in this room here,
and be
and then
contagious.
you walk out of here a day later, 2 days later, you are contagious. So
So you may not be showing so
symptoms
someone
for
may
2
not
weeks,
know.
and then you're going to expose all those people that you're around, and that's why the R naught value is 18. So Lee,
Again,
digress.
even HIV, R naught is 4. You literally have to either swap blood with somebody or have sex with them, which unless you're having sex with people that are unconscious, it's really hard to give 25 people HIV at one given time. But for mumps or measles or there's other diseases that are airborne, a lot of these respiratory infections, TB has a high R naught value.
TB is very high, yeah.
The reason why we vaccinated against these, specifically these types of diseases, is because their ability for one person to get so many other people sick at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the R naught value, and it's based on math. So all of the people that are like,
And how
Right.
R naught relates to herd immunity threshold is by the graph on the right here, is that flu. You have a 30% in vaccination rate, you can prevent the flu from being spread. But for measles, because it's such a high R naught value at 18, you need around 90% of the population to be vaccinated against measles so that it doesn't spread rampantly, just like how we had seen in Disneyland out in California recently, in Florida recently, and a few other hotspots. I believe New York City was one of them, and not Philly. I know Philly had a few outbreaks of measles, but
Wasn't
none of
big enough.
wasn't big enough because people were
Vaccinated.
yeah. So, and I think the major contention for the anti-vaxxers is the next thing we're actually going to cover is the CDC's recommended vaccination schedule. And this basically shows you over the course of your first 18 years of life when you should be vaccinated, how you should be vaccinated, what doses you should be vaccinated with. And I know that Rosa was going to touch on a very important point clinically in terms of people getting their first dose of the vaccination and never returning in terms of their follow-up visits. And I'm going to let you speak about that in just 1 second. But there's plenty of studies out there, and we're going to go into a few of the CDC studies and a few of the World Health Organization. Who are you? But if you give a bunch of vaccines at once, yes, you may have a child maybe like a little sluggish the next day or two, but that's their immune system fighting off these antigens or building up a resistance to these antigens where they're not. The anti-vaxxers go, oh, well, the shine in their eye was taken out of their eye, and they're dull. Yeah, if you've ever felt like you had a headache one day, your kid can have a headache one day.
I like to talk about this a little bit, just because like this is a biology issue, and it's not a biology issue. People don't understand the biology that's going on here. One of the things when you get vaccinated is like you may experience flu-like symptoms. That's a common thing that happens, and the reason why we say flu-like symptoms is because the mechanism in which your body produces an immune response is not different from the vaccine versus the actual infection. Mm-hmm. This by no means actually means that you have a viral infection. But the chemical compounds, the chemical transition associated with cellular activity is similar. So you still have these same effects. You still have headaches, slight fever, redness, rash. Like these things can occur because of the immune response.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the kid has goddamn autism.
No.
And
Rosa, please
well,
speak to
that was one of the things that I think was really important for me. What I've been learning is that I've seen a lot of patients that are either they're pregnant and they don't want to get the flu vaccine, they're going to be achy, they're tired, but that will actually help your child. And we had to convince a lot of, and by convince I mean we explained a lot, giving educational pamphlets and understanding of what is going on, of this actual passive immunity, and to understand that, you know, for their kids when they're going to be born, or for them to keep yourselves healthy, that your immune response that you're building up to these vaccines is that your body is now building a mechanism to be able to fight off these infections. So it's understanding and giving education of what to look forward to, of, you know, okay, if your kid continues to have, you know, a fever past 5 days and nothing's helping, okay, then you call. It's not the immediate, you know, we see all of a sudden our kid has a fever for 1 day, we got to go to the emergency room, this is what's going on. It's to understand and have a really good communication with your doctors and seeing that. And I also thought it was interesting, a lot of doctors were trying to give the vaccines almost all at once to the children because they were unsure, are moms going to come back? Are they going to get their second or third dose of the hepatitis B vaccine?
Are these usually at-risk populations or lower income populations, more lower education populations, or how's the demographic breakdown?
So it is going to be, I mean, it's happened in terms of the people I've spoken with for gauging how they feel with the patient themselves. So if they feel that, you know, the mom is extremely worried, they're not really sure, you know, they're gauging off of that relationship, those meetings. Has this mom not come in for her prenatal baby checks? Has she, you know, been coming? Is she active in figuring out what's going on? Is she asking questions? Is she reading up? You kind of gauge and are with your patient of, okay, what do we think? What is this gut instinct? And if not, it's better to give some of the vaccines all at once than wait on the CDC recommended schedule, because you're getting those.
Just to add to that, I would say there's a belief out there associated with the amount of vaccines given at any given time. There's no evidence that these vaccines in any order or at any time point have adverse effects that are unique to them being all consolidated. Yeah. There is no data whatsoever that supports that notion.
But what about that one report in the Lancet?
My boy Wakefield over here?
With the one...
Captain Crunch, Dr. Seuss scientist?
With the 10 kids that were all formed by no control group, no statistics, and oh my God, memory. And parental bias? So these...
Before you even get into just completely de-ball sacking Andrew Wakefield, I just want to touch on something that Rosa said about at-risk populations. People of lower income and lower education, they are at a disproportionate risk value for disease because of their access to medical care and everything like that. But it's an interesting notion that we have people coming from affluent neighborhoods and societies that are choosing not to vaccinate their kids. They're choosing to put their kids.
They read one study. This happened to one friend, and that.
I think I read an article about a study that they didn't read.
Or they heard their favorite former Playboy talk about it.
One thing that they said, I don't remember which doctor told me, but he had said using stories is what is going to make your patient learn. Giving a statistical value, 80% of people are cured of this, that's not going to stick. If you give a story, if you say, if this were my child, if this was me, this is what I would do. Because in that regard, you are able to bond and say, hey, I'm not saying this because I think less, more, anything of you. I'm saying as a human and as an equal, I believe that this is going to be best for you or your child.
I'm glad that you're in the medical field, because I would just
I would not
be capable of that. I'm like, here's the data that says the kid is going to be safe. I don't have time to argue with your insecurities. So I'm just,
there is, but I think that there's something, you have to bond with your doctors. You can see, there's some people who are brilliant and who, will take great care of you. But if you don't feel comfortable asking a question,
of course,
and they miss something, you want to be able to, what if that mom's like, I don't want to ask. He's so smart. That I don't want to ask about this weird rash.
I mean, there's definitely a disconnect associated with the evidence that we possess and being able to transmit that in a way that people can understand. And I totally get why. I totally understand why people are skeptical about vaccines or any hospital surgery. I get it. They're parents, they're the kids, they're worried about their health.
Big pharma?
Big pharma. They're, whatever the reason that they're worried about, I totally understand that. But
so
the denialism is really the problem.
So I really want to touch on this study. And like former Dr. Wakefield, he's had his medical license revoked, banned from ever practicing medicine in any Western freaking country. And that includes China and Japan, too. So this guy had a study with, I believe, 16 kids?
I think he had 10 kids.
10 kids. So let's put it this way. In 1999, there was a study with 500 kids. In 2001, there's a study with another 10,000 children. 2002, 537,000 children. Another study from Finland that same year, 535,000. 2005, 10 million children. And then in 2012, 14.7 million children.
You know, we had like almost 30 million kids.
30 million kids. To prove that 10 versus 30 million, yes autism, no autism. What are you going to put your money on? I don't know about you, but I'm going to go with the 30 million kids that don't have autism from vaccines. Were you vaccinated? Mm-hmm. Did you get all the vaccines?
I actually have autism. I just...
Jesus.
Oh, no.
This is how false facts become. Someone's going to edit our film and go, oh, well, he's got autism. He took the vaccine. No, like, we all don't have autism. We're not on the spectrum. Well, maybe a little bit, but, like, that's besides the point. That's from genes and genetics. And, like, it blows my mind that all these people, all these parents who have gotten vaccinated themselves go, well, you know, the vaccine caused it. The vaccine didn't really change between when you got it as a child and when your child got it.
Well, let's talk about thimerosal a little bit, because I think that's a lot. That's kind of a big issue. Oh, look at my buddy go right there.
There we go.
Woo!
Mercury.
There we go. So here's an interesting thing. Pretty much if you're 20 plus years old, if you're in your 30s or 40s, you've definitely seen Mercury thermometers, which are widely unused today, but you've probably seen that if you're around this age group. If you break a Mercury thermometer open and play with it like I did as a kid, then you realize that it's like a weird substance. It's a metal, but it's a liquid all at the same time. But it's kind of oily. It can get into your skin and it will absorb. And yeah, it will give you like nerve damage. That's what elemental mercury would do to you.
Elemental mercury.
Yeah, fortunately enough, thimerosal isn't elemental mercury.
It's organic mercury.
But there's even a bigger caveat there, because organic mercury even falls into two categories: methyl mercury and ethyl mercury. And you see this mercury, HG is mercury, by the way. It's not like
one.
Yeah.
Two.
Those are two. I'm sorry for this diagram. This is like IUPAC organic chemistry here, but we're going to break it down real nice and easy for you. You have this mercury compound. You see that bend? That's a carbon molecule. You see that other straight line? That's another carbon molecule. This is ethyl mercury. There's two carbon molecules attached to it. Methyl mercury is...
And it's got a salicylic acid, too.
Does methyl mercury have this? Yeah, it does. It's just that's different.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let me get...
So,
the methyl mercury
has one CH off.
Right. The methyl mercury is found in fish and other seafood stuff. I mean, the reason why we talk about pregnant women and their fish consumption is in regards to methyl mercury. These two things are metabolized completely different in your body.
Mm-hmm. However, there are some common misconceptions about, because it's methyl and ethyl, people don't really distinguish between the two in terms of layman's. And even that, the FDA even admitted to in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s that because the compounds are so similar, it's only one CH3 molecule added onto it between the two, is that when you do association studies or even if you do some type of like high throughput screening, you're going to look at similar compounds and think that they are metabolized very similarly. Is that not correct?
I mean, that's a correct assumption to make, but the data doesn't support that.
But that's not the point. My point is that when you're drug screening or doing something else, you're going to look at compounds that are very similar to one another to, okay, yeah, it's going to be metabolized this way, it's going to have the similar effect. However, in this case, that does not fit the bill. So everyone says, here's the rule. Literally, this is the exception to the rule in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, so I see what you're getting at, you know because, I mean, compounds with similar structure drugs are based on being similar enough to organic compounds but different enough to produce the intended effect.
So think about it like this:
yes,
THC versus CBD.
Right.
Cannabidiol oil.
True.
You know what I mean? Like different cannabinoids. I know that they're much more different in terms of like.
They have similar mechanisms of how they work.
Well, those two don't. But
those two don't. However, they're related
synthetic
compounds.
molecules associated with them do have similar effects. Yeah. So yes, but as we know, as people in the field, doctors, chemists, biologists, molecular biologists, you can stick a phosphate group on a molecule and completely change the way it functions. You completely change the way it's metabolized. So from our perspective, it's increasingly frustrating to hear people think that these things are exactly the same or that anything with mercury in it is going to kill you.
No.
Sodium is explosive with water, but when you put a chlorine molecule on it, it's table salt. Like these are one molecular differences. Yeah, sodium is explosive.
Actually, yeah. If you really want something to watch, go watch Sodium Flame Up.
Just Google sodium and water.
Sodium water, yeah.
I mean, you might get some guys pouring salt into a cup, but not those videos. The videos where they're throwing like elemental sodium into a lake and it looks like fireworks.
So what I have up here is studies disproving thimerosal causes autism. This is the CDC. The CDC is not going to lie to you just so that somebody can make money. And I hate when people say that. And if you're one of those people, please, just jump off the bridge. So brain function, behavior, language coordination, and thimerosal. Thimerosal exposure in early life and neurophysiological outcomes 7 to 10 years later. So 7 to 10 years later, no problems. Studies right there. Go look it up. Read it. Thimerosal exposure in the woman in infancy. Study compared children with autism to those without and looked at prenatal and infant exposure to thimerosal from vaccines. The study found no difference in exposure to thimerosal between children with and without autism. Long-term results of thimerosal exposure. Thimerosal in U.S., UK, and Denmark. So there's numerous study after study after study after
and
study.
numerous organizations that all have come to the American Medical Association, American Pediatric Association, different societies, Sweden, Denmark, China, Finland,
Japan,
Greece. I mean, they
South
all,
Korea. Hell, North Korea probably.
I don't think they. I don't know. Who knows?
Cuba. The Americans, hated Cuba for the longest time.
I mean, at least they
certain ones.
Hey, here's an interesting thing because in Pakistan and Afghanistan, well, I'm not sure if Pakistan and Afghanistan, but I know one of the things that, what's this terrorist people name again?
Al-Qaeda?
No, Al-Qaeda. No, it's Al-Qaeda. The other one. Taliban?
Taliban.
Yeah, I think Taliban is like refusing for some of their villages to like get medical aid and get vaccinations because they think it's like a conspiracy of a way to try to like kill them or something.
So
like
anti-vaxxers are the Taliban?
Yeah, well, they're not the Taliban, but
so Taliban.
Somebody fact check this story because I'm pretty sure I'm semi-accurate about the association. This is one of the reasons why we're having outbreaks in the middle of nowhere and in the Middle East, and including in Pakistan, why we have TB, and so yeah.
Let's put it this way: there's the CDC, the FDA, the World Health Organization, all these different to claim that thimerosal exposures can be linked to disorders such as autism, but public opinion on this matter remains divided because of Dr. Jenny McCarthy's and Dr. who the hell's her husband? Jim Carrey. Like these people.
Love Jim Carrey, by the way. I just
in movies.
That you're an idiot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, dude. Like
you can be good at some things and then not.
I'm not gonna take my.
Ben Carson.
Oh wait.
What? Anyhow,
slaves were immigrants or something. I don't know.
Oh my god.
There's some vicious memes about him, man. Did you see some of those?
I try to stay up there interwebs these days. It's very frustrating. But I will say this though, because thimerosal is not even in
vaccines anymore.
That's
actually true. They were taken out in 2000 for the most part, and only certain years of the influenza vaccine since then have included thimerosal.
I think it's only the multi-dose vials, but the single dose doesn't.
Yeah, so in third world countries, you'll see more multi-dose vials because they need to
just more cost effective.
Yeah, and that's when you see some thimerosal. However, ever since 2000 and this 1998 study, they've removed thimerosal.
Yeah.
So let's put it this way. All these people who are pushing this anti-vaxxer movement based upon thimerosal, and that's primarily the main ingredient that they get up in arms about, it's not even in the vaccine anymore. It's completely out.
Well, just to play devil's advocate.
Bah, 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 bah.
I would say, well, I've heard people say, I've debated people that say, well, if it wasn't a problem, then why did they take it out?
Because they found a better, what's it called?
Preservative. I mean, thimerosal is used as the preservative so vaccines don't go bad. And when we say go bad, so bacteria doesn't grow in it.
Or fungus.
Well, and that's why you guys keep stuff right in storage at a certain temperature, at a certain degree, so that bacteria. I mean, there's bacteria everywhere.
You have to put preservatives on stuff. You have to stop things from growing it because bacteria will essentially turn anything into an energy source, including your goddamn vaccine.
Or you.
Yeah. I mean, Pneumovax is made off of like polysaccharides. Pneumonia is caused by bacteria, by the way. Mm-hmm. So when we make vaccines against it, we have to do it against glycoproteins associated with the cell walls. Blibbity blobbity, whatever. It's bacteria will break it down and use it as energy, so we have to put preservatives in it. But that's besides the point.
Yeah. So yeah, why did they take it out? Because it's an inefficient preservative anymore.
I mean, mostly it was taken out just to save public opinion because, you know what, we can't risk people not getting vaccinated, right? So if we can do the same job with another molecule that you're not going to, have a shit about, then, hey, we're just going to switch it. And that's pretty much what the CDC came to a conclusion with and most drug companies came to because you need people to get vaccinated.
So I'm going to read through some of the World Health Organization's top 10 myths of vaccines. Better hygiene and sanitation will make the diseases disappear. Vaccines aren't necessary. False. Yeah, that will work for some things, but just because you're going to wash your hands after you poop does not mean that you're not going to get sick. And just to say that you're going to increase hygiene and sanitation doesn't mean that Lee's going to wash his hands every time he poops. Just saying.
Why was I the token
I don't know.
not wash my hands after poop?
Well, Rosa yells at me for not washing my hands. So, vaccines have several damaging and long-term side effects that are yet unknown. Vaccination can even be fatal. False. Vaccines are very safe. Most vaccine reactions are usually minor and temporary, such as a sore arm or mild fever.
So I do want to touch on this topic because people don't necessarily understand risk assessment. And the reality is, when you're giving hundreds of thousands, millions of people with different genetic backgrounds an injection, people are going to have adverse side effects. It's a numbers game. It's not a safety game. If 0.1% of 100 million people have an adverse reaction, and only 0.1% of those people die, you can't say this is dangerous. No, it's not dangerous. People get struck by lightning. Shit happens.
However, the fact is that if you didn't have these people get vaccinated, a higher percentage of people would die.
Yeah.
Would get sick, would have larger complications.
I mean, people are allergic to latex. Does that mean that we should stop using latex gloves this?
Well, they made alternatives to latex.
Right.
Nitrile.
So there's different.
And I'm allergic to latex.
Yeah, but we don't just stop.
No, he's not.
Oh, was that like
wink, wink?
Was that like a?
That was a condom joke.
Dirty. PG-13 for our viewers over here.
The combined vaccine against diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, which is also whooping cough, and the vaccine against poliomyelitis cause sudden infant death syndrome.
Never.
False.
No data supports that.
Sudden infant death syndrome happens when you leave your kid on the front and turn.
Nah, actually, we don't know what causes it.
You don't know what causes it. And there's a lot of. I mean, that's the whole problem is that sometimes if you give your kid, they stop breathing. I mean, there's a difference between that and breath holding spells. There's you don't know.
Cats can sleep on your kid's face.
That's
no.
Cats like warm things, and the baby's face is warm.
They have a particular way where you want to have your kid.
Is that a joke?
Nah, that's a thing. That really happens.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
the
cat will sleep on your baby's face.
Vaccine preventable diseases are almost eradicated in my country, so there's no reason to be vaccinated. False. To keep that eradication up, you need to be vaccinated.
Yes.
Vaccine preventable childhood illnesses are just an unfortunate fact of life. So yeah, don't vaccinate your kid. He or she dies from measles. Aw, so sad for you.
Well, here's an interesting thing.
What the hell kind of thought process is that?
Pre-1942, whenever penicillin was discovered, people had to have 15 kids on average because you lost 7 of them to rubella.
Yeah, that's true.
Half your family, half of your litter died from childhood preventable diseases.
Wasn't like cholera, like when they heard there's a cholera outbreak, they would like stop people from like going between cities, like back in, was it 1800? I thought that there was like...
I don't know, actually.
Cholera is a foodborne illness, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
but
just
it's
saying, but in
bacteria
general,
related.
like if they were trying to stop from people to people...
Well, yeah, quarantine. They would quarantine people.
That's what I was trying to think of the word, quarantine.
So
yeah.
they would quarantine people. However, that's mostly, well, in the, what's it called, Black Death, when you had...
Plague.
Bubonic.
You know people
bubonic
get plague every year.
Yeah, bubonic plagues are still a real thing. It's
Yeah.
like buboes hanging out of your arm and
every
stuff.
year people get plague.
Yeah.
In New
However-
Mexico, more so than any other place, and California as well.
Mhm.
But we don't
And
vaccinate.
you would quarantine the whole city if there was an outbreak, you know? So, I don't know.
Luckily, hundreds of people don't get plague.
The CDC has actual quarantine measures on the books that you can actually go and look up to see what would happen if, like, smallpox outbreak occurred.
I just want to say that 1918 Spanish flu killed like a third of the population, and of the world population.
It killed 300 million people. It didn't kill a third of the population. It killed 300 to 500 million people.
Well, how many people were there in like 1918? Like 3
There was
billion.
a couple billion.
Can we Google this? Because I thought it was like a third or like a fourth of like.
No, it wasn't. In certain children in certain cities, yes. In Spain, it killed a lot of people. However, it was actually amplified because of World
Spanish flu.
War I was occurring at the time, so there was a lot of transfer of boats and ships and materials and men across the ocean. So that actually helped.
It killed 500 million people.
Yeah. So
But
it
what
didn't,
percent?
About 1/3 of the planet's population at the
Damn.
time.
Told you,
He was
dude.
on point!
damn.
But yeah,
1/3.
just in case some shit like that actually.
It infected 500 million people worldwide, which was about 1/3 of the planet's population, but killed 20 million to 50 million.
All right, so we were both somewhere
Somewhere
outside of the truth, trying to mingle it in the middle. But
Right?
the
That's
point,
why you use Google.
Dude, that's why we have Google, right?
But
Google's
at
just
the
a search engine. You have to validate your
at the
sources.
same time-
Comes from the WHO.
sometimes those statistics are a little off because of World War I's occurrence at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, also it's hard to get statistics in 1918.
Yeah. Giving a child more than one vaccine at a time can increase the risk of harmful side effects, which can overload the child's immune system.
No
False.
data to support that.
No.
No data to
Influenza,
support that.
influenza is just a nuisance, and the vaccine isn't very effective.
People die
People die.
every day
Yeah.
from the
30
flu.
to
And it's
50,000
not that
people
it's
die
not
a year.
effective. It's you take a chance thinking of which strain is going to be the most.
Oh,
harmful.
actually,
It's
sorry.
not.
300 to 500,000 people every year die from the flu
Like worldwide.
worldwide.
Why?
Almost 500,000 people die from the flu a year.
It's an interesting thing too. I just want to say that, like, nothing is 100% effective. Like, vaccines, drugs, grandma's tea, whatever medicine you're taking, that old remedy, onion in your whatever. Nothing is 100% effective. Like, we are playing the odds every time. So when somebody says, "Oh, it's not 100% effective, why should I do it?" Because the alternative is getting plague. The alternative is getting whooping cough and taking your odds with that and being either dead or disabled. Like,
I'd rather not. It's better to be immunized through disease than through vaccines. False.
I just
I'd
reiterate yes.
rather get cowpox than smallpox and be scarred for life. Vaccines contain mercury, which is dangerous.
Wait, I just want to get back to that point that you mentioned before. I will say this, though. The robustness of their immune response is different from a real infection, right? And that's because we're mimicking an infection. That is true. But what I pointed made was you're risking dying when you get a real infection.
I'd rather not risk dying.
Yeah.
Vaccines cause autism. False. False, false, false. And this is the other thing.
I think I had autism this morning.
UNICEF came out. You got autism. So UNICEF came out with this nice chart. Here's the site that you should go to check it out. We'll put up the slides later. Vaccines are not only valuable in terms of saving lives, but in terms of economics, they're beyond economically valuable. And the fact is that they save $6.2 billion in treatment costs from just having vaccines. That's just treatment costs. That's not loss of productivity because you got sick. That's not, Jimmy died, so we have to replace Jimmy in the workforce with somebody and have to train that person and this, that, and the other thing, and then that person dies because they didn't get vaccinated.
And this is why
so on and
hospitals,
so forth.
most hospitals, most health organizations vaccinate their employees for free. Unless you think they're in cahoots with the pharma companies.
Yeah, I'm going to keep getting my vaccine. So, yeah, I'm in cahoots. All right. So let's just review real quick. First, primary adaptive immune response. You build up your tolerance, you build up your memory, and then when you get an infection later on, your immune system can squash it big time, bigly, huge.
Oh,
Many T cells and B cells will come in and tell me that the disease is gone. And that's basically how it works.
So pretty much just want to give a quick notation here. We're going to put a bunch of sources up attached to this video on our website. So follow us on Facebook, Bio is Life Media. Because you know what, we're just some bullshit scientists. We don't know what we're talking about. You need to go to these sources, validate this concept for yourself, and ask questions and say, hey, does this make sense to me? And if it doesn't make sense to me, go to school and get a PhD in vaccinology or immunobiology like we did.
Well, we're not in immunology.
I know.
Close.
Close.
I'm taking a bunch of immuno courses.
The point that I was making here, is that, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we're PhD students, we're scientists and all that, but we're putting up sources so that you guys can feel comfortable with the information. And please, we are here to answer an endless amounts of questions associated with all of the links that we put up. If you have a question about it, please send us an email or a Facebook message.
And one of the things, I mean, for me being here, I think it's important to understand in a clinical world whether, you know, you're vaccinating your kid or yourself is, you know, I think having a good primary care provider that you feel comfortable asking questions, that you feel you can ask, okay, well, what are the risks? What should I be looking for? What is this vaccine doing? What is it that I need to be aware of? Because I know a lot of times we can hand out pamphlets or we're, you know, short on timing, but it's good to have that communication because people will take the time to be able to explain to you what exactly it's for, how it's working, or if necessary, give you websites that, or videos. For me, I learned by being hands-on or watching a video, and I think being able to, you know, listen to these shows and have, you know, an understanding on a molecular or biocellular level, and then understanding, okay, in the real world, what's occurring, so that you can put those two together.
And boycott Dr. Oz, I hate that guy. He's just a horrible example for all physicians.
God, that's so true.
So yeah, he's just really like.
So, all right. So
That's why I don't even watch.
No, you're good.
I don't have time to even
Same
if I
thing.
wanted to.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't. All right. So yeah, he was called before Congress and was asked like, "Why do you peddle all this like?"
Yeah, I mean, ginkgo biloba extract. Wait, no, diamond extract. There's nothing that you can take. I mean, you could take amphetamines that will make you lose weight, but that is not the best way to lose weight. I mean,
But that's the thing. It's, no, but something like that. Then you have more, you know, at-risk things such as, you know, high blood pressure, or you have heart problems. So
Or you can go crazy.
anything comes at a risk. So it really depends.
or you have a reduced dopamine response.
Yeah, it's true. So just to wrap up, a little housekeeping.
Yeah, this don't mind that amphetamine comment.
So today was vaccines. Next week is going to be deep brain stimulation and optogenetics. That's something that you were interested in.
Yeah, optogenetics is some cool stuff where you pretty much can use infrared light or
whatever light signals to change the expression of genes in
the brain. Yeah,
organisms.
you can modulate neuronal gene expression
That's awesome.
with an electrode.
After that, we have gene therapy, and then after that, I'm excited. We take on the flat Earth myth. That should be interesting.
Yeah, we're gonna step outside of our biology comfort zone and
go into a different realm of science in terms of physics and tackle the flat Earth myth. I'm excited. I'm going to read up a bunch of physics on that because apparently you can have a donut-shaped Earth.
you know, I saw this meme, and I hope that you read more about that than I did because I just took that.
I literally did. I looked into it. Not the most credible sources, but they made a valid argument in terms of like how centripetal force or centrifugal.
You mean like the force
Centrifugal
associated with
force,
movement?
yeah, spinning around.
Like when you spin a pail of water and it doesn't fall
So
out.
they don't believe, if you actually look into it, they don't believe that you can have an Earth-like planet with oxygen, water, and all that, but you can have disc-shaped celestial bodies. So meaning that you can have a rocky planet shaped like a donut, only under certain circumstances.
Can we get some physics students to watch this episode? Because Dave is speaking a different language, and I'm going to need some help.
And then we take on genetically modified organisms at the end. So thank you for joining us. I know it was a longer episode, so I really appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to us rant about how anti-vaxxers suck. So, guys, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.